Good evening, everyone. This evening I want to talk to you briefly about music education in the public school system. Some of you might have heard that our country and our state, probably your own city, is going through some difficult spots with the economy. It's not the greatest time right now. Unfortunately, that's translating directly into budget cuts for federal government, the state, local and city governments, and school districts. And school districts are finding that in order to try and make budgets work, they're focusing more on what we call the 3 R's, which are reading, writing, and arithmetic. I know they're not R's, but we call them 3 R's. Why? Because that's what determines whether or not a school and a school district are, whether they are performing at the point that they should be. The problem is they're cutting out other activities and other instructions, specifically music education, to the detriment of their students long term. Which brings me to my main claim, that reducing or eliminating music programs in K-12 public education is going to have a harmful effect on student achievement. Now, when I talk about music programs, I'm not talking about just music appreciation, going into the classroom and listening to music, but also, and more specifically, formal instruction about reading music and also how to play an instrument, whether it's an acoustic instrument or composing something electronically. So I'm going to cover this by 3 main points. The first would be that music programs help to encourage young students to learn better, to actually have the ability to learn. Secondly, the music programs improve academic achievement. And lastly, that music programs produce lower rates of controlled substance abuse. My first point is that the music programs prepare young students to learn better. Obviously, I think you would all agree that a key thing that you would need to have would be the ability to hear. Not required for everyone, but most people need to have a good ability of hearing to be able to learn and understand what their instructors are trying to teach them. A study that was published in Nature Neuroscience that was comparing the effects of music on the human brainstem and how it relates to understanding pitch and linguistics found that playing a musical instrument as a student significantly enhanced the brainstem's sensitivity to speech sounds. And this directly relates to their ability to not just understand music and what they're hearing in terms of pitches, but also understand language and fine-tune their ability to hear. Secondly, musically trained children perform better in what we call general intelligence memory tests. So Dr. Laurel Trainer, who is a professor and wrote an article on the VH1 Save the Music webpage on the benefits of music education, performed a research study on young children and tested them in different, as I mentioned, different general intelligence memory tests and found that students that had been trained musically performed better as it related to basic general intelligence for literacy, verbal memory, visuo-spatial processing, mathematics, and IQ. So they had improvements across the board, not just in a particular area. Lastly, music students also develop better organization and attention skills. In a book entitled The User's Guide to the Brain, John Ratley proposes that a musician is constantly having to adjust while they're playing to decisions about tempo, the style that they're playing, how they're going to phrase different sounds, and the rhythm and the feeling of what they're playing. So they train their brain to become very good at organizing as well as conducting these different activities. And that has shown to have a great payoff long-term in their ability to have better attention skills and also the ability to be self-starters and to get self-knowledge. So now we've shown how music helps them to learn better. We'll talk about how music programs, which is my second point, we'll talk about how music programs improve academic achievement. Typically, academic achievement is measured by either grade point average or maybe also standardized test scores. So the National Education Longitudinal Study reported that music students, of the ones that they surveyed, that music students have received more academic honors and awards than non-music students, specifically in terms of GPA, that they had higher A's and B's than other non-music participants. Also, when it comes to standardized test scores, the College Entrance Examination Board, who is the one who prepares and administers the SAT test, they do a profile of the test takers every so often. And what they've found is that students that had coursework and experience in music performance and music appreciation had higher scores both in the math and the verbal portions. The students that were more geared towards music performance scored 57 points higher in the verbal and 41 points higher in the math. And then students that had training in music appreciation scored 63 points higher in the verbal and 44 points higher on the math. Both of those compared to students that did not have musical arts participation. That's about an 8% increase and a 5% increase in verbal and math, respectively. So it is notable. And then my last point, which might be the most important as a parent, is that thirdly, music programs produce lower rates of controlled substance abuse. So the state of Texas, their Department of State Health Services, runs a regular survey of substance abuse among their students, and they found that student involvement in extracurricular and co-curricular activity, which would include arts and music, are more resilient to substance abuse than their peers, and they're, specifically students that participated in band, orchestra, or choir reported lower lifetime uses of all controlled substances. So as we've just covered, music programs prepare students better to learn. They also improve academic achievement, and they lower the rate of controlled substance abuse. So school districts should look elsewhere when they're cutting their budgets than music programs, because reducing or eliminating music programs in public education will have a harmful effect on student achievement. Thank you.
I like the introduction. You've got a solid start for the speech. You provide us some context for the controversy there. Very clearly stated what your proposition is. Right at the end of the speech, you come back to that proposition. There's a little bit of a hint of a policy argument there, but I didn't think that undermined the notion that it was a claim of fact from the beginning. There's an excellent layout of what the secondary points are going to be. I did, internally in the organization, I got a little confused listening on your first point. It sounded to me like your first point was actually all three of the points that you were talking about at first, and it wasn't until you were almost transitioning to the second point that I realized, oh, this is still just the first point. I think maybe part of the problem is that you were signposting the minor terms there, and so that got a little bit confusing. But other than that, it was very nicely laid out, and I could follow the transitions in the body of the speech very effectively. It also freaked me out a little bit because I thought, geez, that first point, there's a lot of information, but it doesn't seem nearly as convincing as it might have been. And then you got to the second and third point, and there's a lot more data in the presentation, and I thought you were a lot more convincing as a consequence. You added some statistics in those later points that I think enhanced the argument a little bit, and you were very good about citing the sources very consistently, and I thought you did an excellent job on those things. The presentation, if I'm just listening to you, I think you do a great job because you've got very good vocal variety, there's good emphasis, you pause at the right times, and for the most part, when I look up, you've got some nice gestures and that sort of thing. When you watch the tape, though, you're going to notice that you barely ever look up at the audience. You are looking at your notes. So you do a good job delivering the speech, except for one element of connecting with the audience, and that's the thing I think that dings you just a little bit on your credibility there. But when it comes to the information, I thought it was very nicely presented and structured, pretty easy to follow. All right, thank you.